Throughout life, the two most futile emotions are guilt for what has been done and worry about what might be done. There they are. The great wastes, worry and guilt, guilt and worry. As you examine these two erroneous zones, you will begin to see how connected they are. In fact, they can be viewed as opposite ends of the same zone. There you have it. Guilt means that you use up your present moments being immobilized as a result of past behavior, while worry is the contrivance that keeps you immobilized in the now about something in the future, frequently something over which you have no control. You can see this clearly if you try to think of yourself as feeling guilty about an event that has yet to occur, or to worry about something that has happened. Although one response is to the future and the other to the past, they both serve the identical purpose of keeping you upset or immobile in your present moment. Robert Jones Burdett wrote in Golden Day, "It isn't the experience of today that drives men mad. It is the remorse for something that happened yesterday and the dread of what tomorrow may disclose." You see examples of guilt and worry everywhere, in virtually everyone you meet. The world is populated with folks who are either feeling horrible about something that they shouldn't have done or dismayed about things that might or might not happen. You are probably no exception. If you have large worry and guilt zones, they must be exterminated, spray cleaned, and sterilized forever. Wash out those little W and G bugs that infest so many sectors of your life. Guilt and worry are perhaps the most common forms of distress in our culture. With guilt, you focus on a past event, feel dejected or angry about something that you did or said, and use up your present moments being occupied with feelings over the past behavior. With worry, you use up those valuable nows, obsessing about a future event. Whether you're looking backward or forward, the result is the same. You're throwing away the present moment. Robert Burdett's Golden Day is really today, and he sums up the folly of guilt and worry with these words. There are 2 days in the week about which and upon which I never worry. 2 carefree days kept sacredly free from fear and apprehension. One of these days is yesterday, and the other day I do not worry about is tomorrow. Let's take a closer look at guilt. Many of us have been subjected to a conspiracy of guilt in our lifetimes, an uncalculated plot to turn us into veritable guilt machines. The machine works like this. Someone sends out a message designed to remind you that you've been a bad person because of something you said or didn't say, felt or didn't feel, did or didn't do. You respond by feeling bad in your present moment. You are the guilt machine, a walking, talking, breathing contraption that responds with guilt whenever the appropriate fuel is poured into you. And you are well oiled if you've had a total immersion into our guilt-producing culture. Why have you bought the worry and guilt messages that have been laid on you over the years? Largely because it is considered bad if you don't feel guilty and inhuman not to worry. It all has to do with caring. If you really care about anyone or anything, then you show this concern by feeling guilty about the terrible things you've done or by giving some visible evidence that you are concerned about their future. It is almost as if you have to demonstrate your neurosis in order to be labeled a caring person. Guilt is the most useless of all erroneous zone behaviors. It is by far the greatest waste of emotional energy. Why? Because by definition, you are feeling immobilized in the present over something that has already taken place, and no amount of guilt can ever change history. Guilt is not merely a concern with the past. It is a present moment immobilization about a past event. And the degree of immobilization can run from mild upset to severe depression. If you are simply learning from your past and vowing to avoid the repetition of some specific behavior, this is not guilt. You experience guilt only when you are prevented from taking action now as a result of having behaved in a certain way previously. Learning from your mistakes is healthy and a necessary part of growth. Guilt is unhealthy because you are ineffectively using up your energy in the present feeling hurt, upset, and depressed about a historical happening, and it's futile as well as unhealthy. No amount of guilt can ever undo anything emotional makeup of an individual. In the first, guilt is learned at a very early age and remains with a grown-up as a leftover childish response. In the second case, guilt is self-imposed by an adult for an infraction of a code to which he professes to subscribe. 1. Leftover guilt. This guilt is the emotional reaction which is carried around from childhood memories. There are scores of these guilt producers, and while they work in that they produce results in children, people still tote around these sentences as adults. Some of these leftovers involve admonitions like, "Daddy won't like you if you do that again. You should feel ashamed of yourself," as if that will be helpful to you. "Oh, all right, I'm only your mother." As an adult, the implications behind these sentences can still produce hurt if a person disappoints his boss or others whom he has made into parents. The persistent attempt to win their support is there, and so is the guilt when the efforts are unsuccessful. Leftover guilt also surfaces in sex and marriage. It can be seen in the numerous self-reproaches and apologies for past behavior. These guilt reactions are present as a result of learning to be manipulated by adults in childhood, but they can still operate when the child has grown up. 2. Self-imposed guilt. This second category of guilt reactions is a much more troublesome area. Here, the individual is being immobilized by things he has done recently, but which are not necessarily tied to being a child. This is the guilt imposed on the self when an adult rule or moral code is broken. The individual may feel bad for a long time, even though the hurting can do nothing to change what has happened. Typical self-imposed guilt includes having told someone off and hating oneself for it, or being emotionally drained in the present moment because of some act such as shoplifting, not going at all, or having said the wrong thing in the past. Thus, you can look at all of your guilt either as reactions to leftover imposed standards in which you are still trying to please an absent authority figure, or as the result of trying to live up to self-imposed standards which you really don't buy, but for some reason pay lip service to. In either case, it is stupid and, more important, useless behavior. You can sit there forever lamenting about how bad you've been, feeling guilty until your death, and not one tiny slice of that guilt will do anything to rectify past behavior. It's over. Your guilt is an attempt to change history to wish that it weren't so. But history is so, and you can't do anything about it. You can begin to change your attitude about the things over which you experience guilt. Our culture has many strains of puritanical thinking which send out messages like, if it's fun, you're supposed to feel guilty about it. Many of your own self-inflicted guilt reactions can be traced to this kind of thinking. Perhaps you've learned that you shouldn't indulge yourself, or you mustn't enjoy a dirty joke, or you ought not to participate in a certain kind of sexual behavior. While the restraining messages are omnipresent in our culture, guilt about enjoying yourself is purely self-inflicted. You can learn to savor pleasure without a sense of guilt. You can learn to see yourself as someone who is capable of doing anything that fits into your own value system and does not harm others, and doing it without guilt. If you do something, whatever it may be, and you don't like it or yourself after having done it, you can vow to eliminate such behavior for yourself in the future. But to go through a self-inflicted guilt sentence is a neurotic trip that you can bypass. The guilt does not help. It not only keeps you immobilized, but it actually intensifies the chances that you'll repeat the unwanted behavior. Guilt can be its own reward as well as permission to repeat the behavior. As long as you retain the potential payoff of absolving yourself with guilt, you'll be able to keep yourself in that vicious treadmill that leads to nothing but present moment unhappiness. Parental guilt on children of all ages, manipulating the child to complete a task through guilt. Parent, Donnie, bring up the chairs from the basement. We'll be eating soon. Child, okay. Mom, in a minute I'm watching the ball game and I'll do it when this inning is over. Parental guilt signal, never mind then, I'll do it with my bad back. You just sit there and enjoy yourself. Donnie has visions of his mother falling down with 6 chairs landing on top of her, and he's responsible. The I sacrifice for you mentality is an exceedingly effective guilt producer. Here, a parent can recall all of the hard times in which he gave up his happiness so that you might have something. You naturally ask yourself how you could be so selfish after you've been reminded of your debts. References to the suffering of childbirth are one example of this guilt-producing attitude. I went through 18 hours of labor just to bring you into the world. Another effective statement is, I stayed married to your father because of you. This one is designed to make you feel guilty for mama's bad marriage. Guilt is an effective method for parental manipulation of a child's actions. That's okay. We'll stay here by ourselves. You just enjoy yourself the way you've always done. Don't worry about us. Statements like this are effective in getting you to telephone or visit on a regular basis. With a slight twist, you hear, "What's the matter? You got a broken finger and you can't dial a telephone?" The parent switches the guilt machine on and you behave accordingly, albeit resentfully. The "you disgraced us" tactic is also useful. Or, "What will the neighbors think?" External forces are marshaled to make you feel bad about what you've done and to keep you from thinking for yourself. The "if you ever fail at anything, you'll disgrace us" guilt excursion can make living with yourself after a shabby performance almost impossible. Parental illness is a super guilt manufacturer. "You've made my blood pressure go up." References to killing me or giving me a heart attack are effective guilt prodders, as well as blaming you for virtually all of the normal ailments associated with growing older. You need big shoulders to carry this guilt around, since it can literally last a lifetime, and if you are particularly vulnerable, you can even carry the guilt of a parent's death. Sexual guilt imposed by parents is quite common. All sexual thought or behavior is fertile soil for the cultivation of guilt. God forbid you should masturbate. It's bad. Through guilt, you can be manipulated into the right sexual stance. You should be ashamed for reading such magazines. You shouldn't even have such thoughts. And socially appropriate behavior can be fostered with guilt. "How could you embarrass me by picking your nose in front of Grandma?" "You forgot to say thank you. Shame on you. Do you want our friends to think I didn't teach you anything?" A child can be helped to learn socially acceptable behavior without the accompanying guilt. A simple reminder which follows an explanation of why the behavior is undesirable is much more effective. For example, if Donnie is told that his constant interruptions are disconcerting and make conversation impossible, he will have the first seed planted without having the guilt that goes with a statement such as, "You're always interrupting, you should be ashamed of yourself, it's impossible to talk with you around." Merely reaching adulthood does not put an end to parental manipulation by guilt. I have a friend who is 52 years old. He is a pediatrician of Jewish extraction married to a non-Jewish woman. He keeps his marriage a secret from his mother because he is afraid it might kill her, or more aptly, he might kill her. He maintains a separate apartment with all of the household trimmings for the sole purpose of meeting with his 85-year-old mother every Sunday. She does not know that he is married and owns his own home where he lives 6 days a week. He plays this little game out of fear and guilt about being married to a shiksa. Although he is a fully grown man who is highly successful in his own professional world, he is still controlled by his mother. Each day he talks to her from his office and lives out his bachelor fantasy. Parental and family-associated guilt is the most common strategy for keeping a rebellious person in tow. The examples above are only a small sample of the multitude of statements and techniques for helping a son, daughter to choose guilt, present moment immobility over a past event, as the price of genealogy.